Another great benefit as our client is that education never ends and it's available 24/7. So let's begin first by learning a little bit more about you. So here we have a survey. Let's learn a little bit about how are you using Excel. Go ahead and vote for your choice, and I'll get ready to close this down. About half of you have voted, so that's great. Got a good sized group here today. All right, 81% voted. I'm going to get ready to close that down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, with an 88%. This is what it looks like, Brian. They have never used Excel. That surprises me. That's pretty interesting. All right, so very interesting. 30% said yes, it works and it works great. And 17%, you're just over the edge. So that makes a lot of sense. So that is really great for us to understand who is with us in the house here. So here is a slide. Brian, I'm going to go ahead and let you talk to this, and then we'll do another poll. Brian?
Okay. There are other options, and some of you probably know that and have seen these things at events like Convergence or Envision, and maybe through other webinars that we've done. But you know, sometimes the Excel-based budgeting that is included out of the box, you just need a little bit more to kind of get you over the hill. And if you've used the Excel-based budgeting or played around with it, you know that it's really GL account based, and so everything kind of ties back to your general ledger accounts. Sometimes you want something that's a little more extensive, that is more what we would call operational budgeting, where you can go in and you could put in head count or hours or product sale information and things that really don't necessarily have a place in the general ledger, but you want to actually build up a budget from how the business operates. And so there are other very good solutions out there, and this by no means is a complete list. It's the ones that we see more frequently than others. And some of you might have looked at some of these or might even own some of these, but the BI 360 product and the GP only column is to mean that it is hooked to GP and it doesn't work with anything else, or it doesn't run standalone. And so most all of these will run on their own. They do have integrations into Dynamics GP. The dynamic budgets, the second one there, is really the only one that is GP only, and so that's probably okay because most of you, I'm assuming, are GP customers and users, so that's okay. But if you wanted to run that with QuickBooks, or you might have another business that has another piece of accounting software, so Dynamic Budgets really is designed to be hooked and works only with Dynamics GP. And so there's really no integration needed because it really is a GP ISV product only. The rest of these and the many others that are probably out there do run standalone. Adaptive Insights, which is an adaptive planning product, it actually is a web-based product, so it's online only, cloud only. But all of these have integrations into GP, and we do have at least some customers that use each one of these. You know, it might be just a few, but they are out there, and wanted to make mention. And I think, Kim, we have some of these may be already scheduled for webinars in the future. So if what you see today looks like it's a little bit light and you want to get more into that operational budgeting, then stay tuned for some future webinars. We'll be featuring some of these in the near future and on into 2017. So thanks, Kim.
You bet. Excellent. And that's right. We do have the Solver BI 360 and Dynamic Budgets as part of the webinar series. Okay, should I go ahead and launch the second survey?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's ask you, now that you know what's possible and what's out there, which ones are you using today? Go ahead and vote. And we should also mention that there are a lot of GP customers out there using Forecaster, which is working fine, but again, that unsupported solution, but a product done by Microsoft. There's still a lot of folks that are capitalizing on their investment there. All right, we're going to get ready to close. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, with 67%, in other words, maybe it was that we didn't have something listed there, and about 60% of you said dynamic budgets and 40% said something else. Excellent. All right. Good to know. Good to know. Well, it's a good thing we've got some dynamic budgets education going on. All right, Brian, I'm going to go over and hand over the presentation rights. I'll let you know when I can see your screen.
All righty.
Now it's time to jump into GP and let's learn about budgeting. All right, I can see your screen. Take it away.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Okay, so as Kim mentioned, we're going to really focus on the Excel-based budgeting piece that's out of the box, kind of embedded into Dynamics GP, and look at some of the ways that we can use that. We'll look at some other features in Dynamics GP as well, like budget transactions and combining budgets and so forth after we actually build a budget. And so this is the kind of time of the year, but if a lot of us are on calendar year, which we probably are, that most of us are thinking about 2017 budgets. And so most all of you probably know that there's been a budget tool in the system in the financial cards area for a number of versions, many versions. And you'll see here that I've got a number of budgets already set up in my Fabricam company here. There's no limit on how many budgets we can have, and we can do a preliminary budget, we could do a kind of an amended budget, we can have final budgets, and some people you know, have 3 or 4 or 5 budgets that actually get folded into the system in any one calendar year or fiscal year. And of course the idea is if we have the budget inside of Dynamics GP that we can pull that into Management Reporter or Jet Reports or BI 360 or FRX if you're still using FRX, and so those products see the budget information that we have in the software. And so let me just open one before we get started here, and you'll notice that I've got a 2018 projected, and if I click open, I can open this in Excel, which is you can see the X to the left of my budget ID. That means that this budget actually was an Excel budget. Or I can open it inside of Dynamics GP, and so when I bring that up, it shows me the budget, and of course there's nothing there because it's waiting for me to decide which account I want to actually look at. One thing I want to point out is this lock, padlock right here. It is very important that at some point somebody lock the budget. I can't even begin to say how many times we see clients that have a budget and it somehow gets magically deleted during the year, and if you click the delete button up there in the top in the ribbon, that will actually delete the budget. And it does give you a warning, but sometimes, you know, it happens. And so we always recommend that you use the lock here after you have the budget in and kind of the way that you want it, so it's situated for use, that somebody come in and put a password in. It doesn't have to be a top secret thing. It's just to protect any user that might have access to this window from actually accidentally deleting the budget. And of course the other thing that is helpful as well is if you protect this window based on your security roles, you can deny access to this window from just, you know, the people that would actually really have access to it and really be able to go in and make edits. And so you just have to be very careful with that. And so again, it's deleting a budget is probably the #1 thing that happens that's preventable with just a little bit of forethought. And so let's go ahead and close this. And so yeah, you see, because I actually did some things here, that it's saying, do you want to save or delete the range of accounts? Well, sometimes people will say, well, I didn't do anything, so I can delete my changes. Well, it's not really asking that. It's saying, do you want to delete all the accounts that are inside of the 2018 projected budget? And if you do, if you click delete, then your budget's gone. Your accounts are all disconnected. So a good rule of thumb in Excel-based budgeting or Dynamics GP budgeting inside of the software is to always click save unless you really kind of know what you want to do. So that can be very, very dangerous and very easy to accidentally delete something. So, okay, so enough about security measures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the scenario of it's time to get the budget prepared, at least preliminarily, and get it out to our department heads so that they can have a look. And maybe you have people that prepare parts of the budget, and so we want them to start working on it and then go through the exercise of collecting those budgets back and getting those into our dynamic system. And so I'm going to create a new budget, and I'm going to use the budget wizard for Excel. And so that opens the wizard, and so we just have to click through this, and it's asking for the budget ID that we might want to use. And so I could use a budget ID that's already in the system, but I haven't created a budget at all, so I'm just going to say 456 budget, like that, just so we'll be able to identify it real easy. And of course I could give it a description. And then I have the opportunity here to budget for the whole year, or if for some reason I want to do a budget for just a certain group of periods, I can select the date range as well. And so sometimes if we're doing a special project, or maybe we've got something going on and we just want a budget for 3 or 4 months, we could actually have what I'd call a mini budget that really is not our annual budget, but it's really just for maybe a particular thing that we might be doing, and we've got some GL accounts set up that we're going to capture that data in, so we can do a sub-budget, so to speak, that does not span the whole year, or we might span into another year. So if we have kind of using our GL system for job cost, where we might have a segment that's related to a project or a job or jobs that we have going on, we can actually create the budget to span into another fiscal year as long as we have that year created in our GP system. And so, but I'm going to do just a year here, and I'll do 18 because my data here is in 2017. And so pretty easy there. And so then the next option that we have to select here is what do we want the system to do for us to actually get the budget kind of prepared. So a blank budget is just that. It's just a blank Excel spreadsheet. It has our GL accounts and a column for every period that we've asked for, but there's nothing in it, and so it's blank. We can do a historical year budget, and that builds a budget based on a prior year. And so if I select that one, the system says, okay, well, what do you want to do? So it looks at all of the years that are marked historical, so in other words, closed years that I have in my GP system, and it says, well, which historical year do you want to actually use? And so I would pick one of those years, and then I can, at this point, decide, do I want to increase my budget from 2013? In other words, do I want to build my 2018 budget based on the actual numbers in 2013 plus or minus a certain percent, or I could just pull 2013 numbers out and say that's going to be my 2018 budget. So I'm going to go back here, and so we can look at the rest of them. I can do an other budget percent, and so again I can build my 2018 budget off of another budget. So if I had a budget last year, so maybe my 2017 budget that I really liked, but maybe I needed to tweak that a little bit, again with an increase percent or a decrease percent, I have the ability to do that as well. So now we're building a budget off of a budget. And then the final one is an open year percent, and that is kind of the same as the historical. It's looking at all the years that I have in the system that are open and allowing me to do the increase or decrease from that. And so I don't have a lot of historical information in my sample data, and so I'm going to actually just build a blank one so that we can key the numbers in. And so after we make that selection, and then we go into start to finalize what the template's going to have in it here, then the system asks us, do you want to actually pull any of your older years into the spreadsheet? And so if we wanted to have actual numbers so far this year, or maybe we wanted last year's actual or 5 years ago actual, or any number of those, we could pull those into our template so that the folks doing the budget numbers could actually refer back to what it was last year, because when people build budgets, we typically will say, well, what did I spend last year? And so that's kind of going to be the basis for my budget this year. And so that's an option we have to bring that prior year information as a tab into the Excel template. And so I don't really have much in any of these years, so I'm just going to skip that. And then the next step is the system wants to know, well, are you budgeting balance sheet accounts? So do you want to see those, or do you just want your P&L, kind of your income, your expense accounts, or your unit accounts? And so, and I can multi-select here, of course, and so I'm just going to budget my profit and loss accounts. And so then it says, okay, well, what accounts do you want now that you've told me you wanted P&L accounts? Well, obviously I could do them all. And so if one person does the budget, that's an easy way to do that. But I'm going to assume that I have multiple people actually entering the budget information. And so when I say I want to pull by segment, I'm going to grab a division here, and then of course, just like everywhere else in GP, I can look up the first segment in my chart of accounts, and I'm going to budget the sales division here. And so we're going to limit this particular spreadsheet to accounts that start with 300 or are in my sales group. And so this will look familiar because we use the same kind of technology in lots of parts of the system here. And so then it presents all the accounts that are in sales in Department 300 or Division 300. Well, let's suppose that maybe HR actually takes care of the payroll and benefits and so forth, and so my sales manager actually would not be budgeting the actual personnel costs. That person would really only be budgeting kind of the overhead type accounts, the G&A type accounts from sales. And so I'm going to just take off the payroll and HR related, and we'll just let the rest of these things go into the spreadsheet. And so when I say next, the system says, well, are you going to put this into an existing Excel file, or do you want to create a new file? So, well, I don't have one out there, so I'm going to create a new workbook. And then when I click finish, the first thing it does is say, well, where do you want to save this? And so I'll save it out in my folder here. And then at that point it does the creation of the template, and I have now exactly what I asked for. So I'm doing a full year blank budget, so there's nothing there. I didn't pull anything from a prior year, and so I don't have any additional tabs down at the bottom of my Excel file to show last year's actual or 2 years actual or last year's budget, which I could have if I would have had data there. And I have all my accounts from the sales division here that start with 300, with the exception of my payroll and kind of labor related accounts. And so a couple of key things when you create this template. This, for Dynamics to actually import this properly, we have to kind of have this template stay intact. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't create a row here, and so I could insert a row and call it, head count or something else that maybe I just want to have available here or do some calculations on. That's okay. I'll get an error, obviously, that row won't be imported because at this point GP doesn't recognize what that is. But what I do have to have are column A, I need the account number, obviously. I need the description, although these could be blank and I could change these. We're not updating the GL accounts with this import, and so I do have control over what I have in the description column, but I do need that column there. I need all of these columns, beginning balance through the number of periods, so in this case the full year, period 12, I need those columns to remain in the spreadsheet. And I also need that total column. And so you'll notice I added a row, which is fine. I could add columns out towards the end if I want to. That's all okay, but I can't take away what the template actually created, or it's not going to import. And then the first three rows, so row 1 you'll notice is blank, row 2 has the date range on it, which was generated by the export wizard, and then row 3 has my headings on it. Those 3 rows have to remain intact, and so I created row 4, so that's okay. That'll error when I try to import because it doesn't recognize that row or the numbers I put in there, so that's fine. But I can't get rid of those 3 header rows. Those are critical to the import back into the system working. What some people will do is they'll create another tab down at the bottom, and they might do some calculations here. So I could label that calc, and I might do some head count and labor rates or unit sales or whatever it might be. So I'm free-form Excel here. So I can have unlimited tabs where I might calculate things to actually support my budget, and I actually could link those. So if I want account 300, 6100 here to actually link to another tab, I can do that. I could actually put a formula in here to do calculations, but before I import this, I really need to get back to the value that GP is going to see. And so if I put a formula here and say, 30 times my 36 up there, whoops, equals, we'll say 36 times 30. I can do that all day long, but before I import this, I need to get rid of that formula. So basically I need a value in there. And so an easy way to do that, which I'm sure everyone knows, is when you copy a cell and you can paste right back into it, but you want to select the paste option that has values. And so yes, that takes away my formula, and so I do kind of give that up. But if I have the formula or a pointer into another tab in there, then GP is not going to get the right number. It will import something, but it's not going to be what we want, almost guaranteed. And so from here, the idea would be that we save this out on a shared drive or SharePoint, or we might package it up and email it to someone. But the idea is that whoever is responsible for this budget, so in this case, let's say it's our sales manager, we would want to get this to our sales manager so he or she could actually complete the information here that we need. And so I'll just kind of play that role and say, well, we're going to put some numbers in here, and I won't do them all, of course, but we'll kind of put a few on these 2 top accounts here. So maybe just something that we notice, so when we bring this back in, we'll have some data. And so you'll see the math working in the template just like you normally would in Excel, and so that's nothing unusual there. Let me put this back up here. And so before we save this and import it, I do want to create an error automatically for us. We'll probably get an error on row 4 because the template wizard is not going to understand what this is, rightfully so. But I do want to create an error down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this last segment here to 99. And so I'm pretty positive that I don't have 99 available in my 3rd segment. And so I want to do that because I want to show you what Dynamics does now, and this is actually a new feature, is will alert us that there's an account that is no good. And so we'll talk more about that when we actually get back into the budget import. And so here, let's assume now that my sales manager has completed the entire budget and they're ready to go. And so they either email me or IM me and say, hey, I've got my budget done. It's right where you left it, so I can go retrieve it, or maybe they save it and they email it back to me So I will go through those steps. So I'm going to save it and close it down. And so now I'm going to go retrieve that budget and bring that back into Dynamics. And so we're back in. So if you're following along, we're back into Cards, Financial, and Budgets. And so we've got, again, a number of budgets here. And there's my 456 budget that I already created. And again, the Excel X there tells me that this is an Excel budget that's integrated with GP, or will be, that it's not just a Dynamics GP budget only. And so I use the Excel wizard, so under the Excel button, and now I'm going to import from Excel and bring that budget back in. And so the wizard kicks off here again. And I could actually create the budget or create another budget in GP. So this is a good way to do tests. And so it's, budgets are an area that are always really, really good to do testing to make sure that you kind of get what you want and everything's looking the way that it should. And so I could create a 4, 5, 6 test here and bring it in and just kind of play around with it and make sure that everything is well. And then I can re-import that budget into my live budget if I want to. There's nothing stopping me from importing the same budget multiple times into different budget IDs. Now if I import it into my 456 budget, after I do this initial one, it will overwrite what's in there. And so again, a good reason to maybe lock the budget, that you don't automatically import one that you didn't want to. The other kind of, just while we're talking about that, another tip here is because budgets do seem to get deleted by users incorrectly from time to time, it's always nice to be able to take your budget and export it back out into Excel once you're complete and final. Just create an export of the budget and just use that as a backup. So you could put that on a drive that gets backed up, maybe on a thumb drive or something, or in a OneDrive or some kind of cloud storage location. It's always nice to have a backup of that budget from time to time so that if somehow it does get deleted mysteriously, that all we have to do is just go re-import that budget, and we don't necessarily want to restore our entire database just to get the budget back, because of course when we do the restore, then we'd lose everything back to the restore point. And so I'm going to import this into my 456 budget that I've already have in here. Of course this is empty right now, but I've already created the header information for it. And so we are prompted to tell the import wizard, where's your file at? And so it does kind of remember the major path name here, so I just have to go pick the budget. Now you'll notice here that it senses that there's been a new tab created in the spreadsheet, and so I have to tell the wizard which tab actually has the template that I'm using. And so of course that was the first tab there. I don't want to have the wizard look at the calculation tab. And it says at this point it's got enough information, it should be able to start the process. And so this is the new feature that's in GP 2016, and if you're on anything other than 2016, you will have not seen this before. And so in 2016 we actually get an exception report that if there were problems with the import, we have a report now to tell us what went wrong. In 2015 R2 and earlier versions, it just didn't tell us anything. And so if we had a bunch of bad accounts, or if something was messed up in the template, we really didn't have much to go on. The budget may have imported partially, and it was up to us to figure out what part came in and what part didn't. If it didn't import at all, that was easier to diagnose because the budget files would be empty, but it didn't really tell us why it didn't import. So this was a very highly requested feature, and it did finally make it into version 2016. And so we're going to look at that edit list, or that exception report. And so we've got two errors here. The first one was kind of expected because I created a row there for headcount, and I told you that we were probably going to get an error, rightfully so, and so that's okay. We can ignore that. But then remember, I changed the third segment on this last account in there on purpose so that you would see that I'm using an invalid account. And that was a huge problem in prior versions where I might have had a bad account, or maybe somebody accidentally changed something like this scenario in the spreadsheet, and of course I wouldn't have caught that or even known that doing the import from Excel. And so this exception report or edit list now tells me that, hey, this account's gone bad. And so then I can follow up. I can open the Excel file and see, are we even using that account? If we're not even using it, then I probably don't care. I can ignore it. But if somebody actually entered budget data on that line, then I have to figure out what happened to the account number and what they intended that to be, and do a little homework here to see where that account needs to go, because right now if there's figures on that row, they're not coming in to the import file here. And so that's something new if you're not on 2016. Okay, and so that was a pretty small budget and takes very little time to actually bring back in. And so at this point now we can open that budget, and I could open it back in Excel if I wanted to make changes and re-import it. Certainly okay. And it will overwrite the existing budget that came in. So or I can open it in GP. And so when I bring that up, now remember we only use 2 or 3 accounts, so I think that's the first one. And so there's the budget that I have in GP now from Excel, and then of course I have the next account, probably 6120 here, and so yep, so my numbers are there just like we expected. So before we kind of make now entries to the budget, journal entries to the budget, I do want to call out a couple of things on the budget maintenance window itself. I could actually prepare a budget without using the Excel export and import at all. So that's just one way to do it. I can actually prepare my budget just by coming in. In fact, let me save this and we'll just bring up the blank template here. And so I didn't want the account in there. And so from here, I could actually prepare a budget or change a budget right from this window. And so what I want to do is come in and put a range in. And so again, just like the Excel template, if I want to work with my 300 division here, I want to restrict my changes to 300. And so I click OK. Now if I don't put a range of some sort and I don't have a GL account here, then my budget won't, nothing will happen when I try to either create or make changes to this budget. And so sometimes people get frustrated because they think they're doing it and nothing's happening. And so you either have to select an account to make changes to or create a new budget, or you have to put the range in there if you're going to leave the account blank. And obviously if you want to do just one account, then you would bring up the account that you want to change. But if you want to do all accounts that are inside of this budget, then you want to do the range and pull in those accounts that that are represented under the budget. And so then once I have a range selected, and so you can see that that's still out there, then I can come under methods and I can actually make changes to the budget here. So I could come and make a 5% increase if I wanted to, and if I click calculate there, then that will go through and apply that change and increase my budget 5% on every single account that has a budget number that's in my 456 budget. And that can be a little risky if you don't kind of get it right. So you can make changes to your budget that maybe you don't want to. And so again, this is not one that you want to use just haphazardly, and it's always good to do this either in a test company or in a test budget just to make sure that you get the results that you want. And so that's just a word of caution. Now, I said that we could actually build a budget without using the Excel wizard and template whatsoever, and so we can do that. If I were to create a budget here, maybe 456, and I did not create the export file and bring that back in like we just did a second ago. I could come in here and I can select the account ranges that I want in my budget, and I can come in and still do much like we can do to create the Excel template. I could create a budget with all the accounts in my sales group here and base it on another budget. I can set it to a certain dollar amount. I can look at a historical actual year and then create a budget based off that. And so much like pushing this into Excel to send out to other folks that might want to create the budget in Excel and then we import it back in, I don't have to do that step. If I'm the budget person, there's no one else, I don't need to go to the Excel trouble. I can actually create the budget right here inside of Dynamics GP with the same parameters and rules here that I had access to in the Excel template. And so the Excel is really designed for us to send this out to other folks to fill out and send back. But if you're the person, you don't have to go through that step or that trouble at all. Okay, so now we've got a few accounts in the budget, and so now let's move on to some budget transactions. So, you know, we're now into the year and maybe we want to change the budget. Well, a new feature, I think in GP 2015, maybe 2013 R2, was the ability to actually enter transactions, so debits and credits, against a budget. Because prior to that, if we wanted to change a budget, we either went back through the Excel exercise or we came back into the budget maintenance window and we just typed over it or we imported over it. And so that was fine. That got us our changes, but that really didn't give us an audit trail of what the budget was prior to the change. And so a big request of Microsoft was we really need to see our original budget, and then we want to see amendments to the budget throughout the year, but we don't want to lose our original. And so this is a very creative way that they came up with to actually do this. Now, before we actually do a transaction, I want to point out a key setup feature that's required if you want to use the inquiry system to your budget transactions. And so what we want to do is go under our setup and financial and our general ledger setup. So tools, setup, financial, general ledger. And if this looks completely foreign to you, you'll have to get your system administrator to make this change for you, but most of you probably will recognize where we're going here. So there's an option that's been added under the maintain history part of the GL setup for budget transactions. And when the software is installed, that is not checked by default. And so that's one that you probably want to go put the checkbox in right here, so that it looks like budget transactions will keep history. That doesn't stop us from using the journal entries into the budgets, but it doesn't allow us future inquiry into those entries. And so it will make the changes, but when we post those transactions to our budgets, we can't go inquiry on those transactions later. And so we get the updated budget, we just don't know how we got it. And so that's kind of a key thing if you're going to use the budget transactions. So once you make that change, once you make sure your system is set up that way, then under transactions and financial, and of course I could toggle over to the financial page and get to this as well, you'll see a new transaction item here for budget transactions. And so, and this is really meant to be like a journal entry into your budget. And so it says, okay, well, what date do you want to make it? So let's maybe say that I'm coming along here, my budget's in, but about the 1st of May, I need to amend it, and I don't want to just overwrite it. I want to actually change it so I have my original budget intact. And I've got my required fields turned on, so that's what you see in red, is those things that we need to tell the system here to get it to work. And then it says, okay, well, which budget are we going to be amending? And so I'm going to amend my 456 budget. Now I can put these in a batch just like I could a GL entry or a payables entry or anything else in the system, I can save it in a batch if I want to, but I'm going to actually just post mine here as we're using it. And so then it says, okay, well, which accounts? Now, this has the same rule as the budget maintenance window, that I can come up and I can go into the range area here. So if I want to pull all the accounts in my sales group and I want those to all be affected, I can put a range on it and then update my budget for every account that has a budget in that range in my 456 budget that's sitting out there in the system. And so that's really how you would do it if you want to get to all of your accounts that are in this budget. But since I only have really 2 here that we were working with, I'm just going to put the accounts in so you can kind of see what it's going to do here. And so there's my training in my sales group, and you'll see there that my current budget is now being displayed. So that's the same thing that we brought in from Excel and put into the budget maintenance window electronically. And so it wants, you know, me to tell it how we're going to make the change here. And so again, I can make a percent change, so I can increase or decrease my budget based on a percent, based on a dollar amount, or I can just type a number in. So if I want to go in and say I'm going to put $25 more in the budget for these months, I can do that. I'm going to go ahead and let it do the work for me, and I'm going to say I want a 10% budget increase here across the board on this account. And so when I click calculate, you'll notice now the adjustment has been calculated for me at 10% of what the current budget was, and those all look correct where I had budget numbers. And so at this point I can post it. And again, what this is doing is preserving the current budget. We're not overwriting that like we used to have to do, and it's doing debits or credits to that budget. Now if I would have done a decrease, of course then I'm going to get what you might think of as a credit. I'm going to get a decrease against the budget instead of the increase here. And so I'm going to go ahead and post that. And so, and it prints a posting journal just like you would expect. And so just kind of what we saw on the screen there. So lots of people don't keep those because they're keeping history and they can do an inquiry on it. And so now from here I can inquiry into the budget journal entry or the budget transaction. And so if I bring up my account 300, 6100 in my sales group, and I have to tell it again which budget do I want to actually kind of view. And so now we can see those adjustments. Now if I did not have that maintain history checkbox marked in my GL setup, I would still get to this window, but I wouldn't have anything in the adjustments column because the history was not being kept. And so so from here I can highlight any of these rows and I can drill down on the adjustment, and I can actually see this was budget journal entry number 2 for May 1st, and I can drill back into that, which kind of takes me back to that entry, but I already kind of know that information. And so that's kind of the new feature around budget transactions. And let me drill back in there and talk about one thing. The other nice option here is the note field. And so if I wanted to put a reason here why I was increasing the budget, maybe I had something from the boss that said, hey, make these budget changes, and so I want to use the document attach window, I can do that as well, and go out to a PDF or an Excel file or something where that might be that I want to actually have that available here. And so the few seconds there it took was because it was making a connection with my scanner, which I do have turned on today. And so I think most of you know you can scan directly into the document attach window, or you can go out and browse out to the drives that your computer has access to. So if I want to go get that spreadsheet that has these changes, so I've got myself covered here and it doesn't look like I just arbitrarily changed it, I can always go grab that and bring that into the journal entry here that was being made. And so this is the new window that kind of goes along with the budget transactions. Um, Occasionally, we might want to combine a budget, so maybe we've had 2 or 3 that we've pulled in from Excel or we've entered into Dynamics GP, but really we want to get those budgets into a single budget, and so there is a way to actually combine, and so we'll go back to our budget cards here, and let's see, I'll go to one of my other budgets here. And so here if I bring up budget number 1, and maybe I want to combine my budget number 1 and my budget number 3. And so I can use this combine feature. Now this has a little bit of danger to it as well, and that is the checkbox says delete budget after it's combined. And so again, this is a good thing to test if you haven't done this so that you understand what it's doing and how it's going to work. And so the master budget is the key here. And so the master budget is the one that will survive if you have this delete budget after combination, if you have that checked. So in my example here, budget 1 will remain. Budget 3 is the one that will go away and be deleted after it's combined with budget 1. And so if you want an extra level of safety, you don't have to check that box. You can combine them and then go look at budget 3 and make sure that it is in fact empty, and then manually delete it. But we have seen people that they check the box and they've got these backwards in their window here, and so it does the combination, but it deletes the wrong budget. Well, it deletes the wrong budget according to them, and so you want to make sure that that you completely understand here what it's doing. And so the key here to remember is the one that's labeled master. Whatever you select in as your master, that's the budget it's going to keep. And so if I process that, these budgets are fairly small, so it goes pretty quick. And so that's been done. And if we go back to the window here, now you'll see that budget 3 did in fact go away, and whatever was in budget 3 now is combined into budget number 1. And so that's a handy little tool, as long as you use it carefully, to actually be able to clean up some of your budgets. And if you bring in department 300 and then you bring in department 400 and so forth, if you want to get those combined into one budget, because that's the budget that you've linked into Management Reporter or FRX or JET or whatever it might be, that keeps it kind of simple and keeps it kind of tidy for you. So that's really the process, using Excel-based budgeting to create a template, push that out to a shared drive or someplace that you can email that off if you're sending it to someone that doesn't have access to your drives. The idea is that they complete that, whoever that might be, and send those back. And by the way, you can bring back Department 300 and import that into your budget 456. Maybe tomorrow, Department 200 persons sends their budget in. I can import that into budget 456. No real danger of overwriting because we have separate accounts. We've got 300 in there. If I import 200, that's not going to touch my 300s. And so what we don't want to do is re-import 300 if you know, if we don't want to overwrite 300s. And so that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple to do, pretty quick way to do it. And as long as they don't change your template, because again, we need the Excel template to kind of stay intact there with the columns and the first 3 header rows and so forth. We have a nice edit list now, or exception report available, so we can see what did not come in. So there's no mystery anymore on, you know, 10 accounts got dropped off because we couldn't find them, or we had a row that just wasn't right. We can verify those things now with that report. And so once that comes back in, then we have our budget. It's a good idea to lock that down with a password once you're kind of finished with it and you're ready to start really relying on it. But then we can make journal entries to the budget with the GL budget transactions to do increase and decrease changes to the budget so that our original budget remains intact. And then as long as we turn on the maintain history checkbox in our GL setup, we have the ability to run inquiries and drill down on those journal entries and do our document attachments and whatnot that we would normally do in any part of the system. And so, Kim, I think we could open it up for some questions if there are any, or comments.
There are. Woo!
Okay.
Awesome, and there were throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and address each one. The first question comes from Sue, and it is, can you address the budget transfer feature? I believe there is some setup involved. Then the translation to do the transfer. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but does that make sense?
Maybe if Sue is still out there, we could let her talk just a little bit more about that and more specifically what she's trying to be able to see here.
Sounds good. Let me unplug her, so hold on. Okay, let me look here. Sue, can you speak? Sue? Hi, Sue. You might not have a speaking capability, but
could be.
Yeah, so Sue, can you speak? All right. Not able to get her there, sorry.
Okay, if not, maybe Sue could email us and tell us more specifically what she's trying to do, and then we can reply back to her. But there shouldn't be anything that needs to be done setup-wise. I mean, I think I showed you all of the setup that's really kind of critical, and the budget tools all install with GP, and so there's not really any other setup or settings that should have to be changed. But if there's something that you're having trouble with or haven't been able to figure out, then Sue, please email that in to either one of us, and we'll certainly get it figured out for you.
Excellent. Martha asked the questions, were we able to import from formulas all the time?
No, that is probably a GP 2015 change. So if you have an older version, that would not have worked at all.
And Mike asked the question, what version of GP are you showing today?
I am actually showing 2016.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I was going to say I wanted to get that exception report when I imported and I had a bad account. I wanted to be able to show that exception report that account failed, and that's only in 2016, and so I used my 2016 image here.
All right. Here's another one. In regards to the exception report, once the error is correct, can you add the one account manually or import the whole budget again?
Yes to both of those. If it's just one account, you could go just key that in if that's quicker. You could actually delete your budget and re-import again, or you can import and overwrite what's there after you fix the account in the Excel file. So really pretty easy to deal with if it's one. If you've got a bunch of them, probably easier to just fix it in Excel and then re-import.
Okay. Gavin asked the question, if the budget is locked, are you able to perform the budget adjustments that you showed? Thank you.
That's a great question, and yes, you can. The budget lock is really just for the budget maintenance, and so the lock feature actually works right here. It stops people from deleting the budget only, but or combining and deleting. But yes, if the budget's locked, you can still do the transactions.
All right. Martha adds here, we actually do import from formula all the time on 2010.
Okay, so that's been around for a little while then. So
okay, and
thank you.
This is Susan coming back, who didn't have speaking capabilities, and it says transactions for the transfer, i.e. journal entry.
Okay. No, there's no real setup for that at all because you're dealing with the budget and not the GL account specifically. That should be there and functional when GP is installed, and so nothing really to do to get that to work.
Really great questions today, so that's super. We have now hit the wall as far as questions. Any last words of advice, Brian, before we let folks go back to their work?
No, thank you everyone for attending and for the good questions. This Excel-based budgeting is really designed to be simple. It is limited to GL accounts, and so again, if you want to get into the whole operational where you're budgeting machine hours and product sales and so forth to actually compile budgets, then we probably need to look at something a little more sophisticated. But if your budget is tied to your general ledger accounts, the Excel-based budgeting is meant to be easy, streamlined, and quick, and really something that if you're not using, hopefully it's something that you can seriously look at from this day forward.
Excellent, Brian. Thank you so much. And again, we'll put a copy of today's recording out on our website so that, I shouldn't say our website, our